Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. All right. All right. So, just a quick disclaimer, guys. I'm a bit nasally, so bear with me. Tonight's episode is inspired, or the sentence for tonight's episode. It's one of those sentences where I was driving on the highway. And I was wondering about what is, in some sense, influencing the personality. Or what are the limits of the psychology of the human being? So I came up with this sentence: does personality simulate based on realities accepted? Now, what could be interchangeable with this word reality is just worlds. So pretty much to me, the human personality is like a type of movement of a creature. And when I wonder about in what sort of world the personality walks in, it's based on the world it has started from. There's this very fascinating idea that human beings cannot just have a sense of self without having a sense of world. It's as if there was just the world at the beginning, and some part of it began walking on it, and it considered itself as a self. In other words, the definition of a self is an intelligence that can separate itself from the whole world. It's another way of saying that self and the concept of the world are codependent. Now, personality to the modern human being is their self, And so, a sense of self is an extension of a world. And so when a human being wonders about, okay, what's the destiny of my personality? realize that in some sense their personality is a simulation based on an accepted context of meaning. I'll give you myself as an example. For example, I'm giving these talks, using the online alias Mr.Within. For me, I would say my personality for these talks, or when I give these talks, its context, its world is based on what I have termed, for example, the advanced civilization. So to me, my personality is inspired, or the limits of my personality is the limits of the world where that sense of personhood is extended from. And when that world belongs to the inner realms, there's a strange freedom. You see, the reason I'm giving these Mr. Within talks, to be honest, sometimes I feel I figured it out, sometimes it's a mystery to me. But in this moment, I would say it's as if when I look at it, it's a rock in the middle of nowhere, 4.5 billion years evolution in the making. And in these 4.5 billion years, a creature has arose. I think in the last 200,000 years or whatnot, this creature began speaking, communicating as an animal properly. And so it's like a bunch of creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere after 4.5 billion years have recently acquired language and in some sense are living a life where they don't know if the mind should be in the driver's seat or the body. This is really the cool kind of pre-cyberpunk phase we're in. In the subtitle of this episode, I have shared two concepts where I say, it's pretty straightforward, updating systems plus looping systems. And to be honest, I have seen theological parallels to my secular understanding of what I'm going to share with you. Ultimately, the moment I realized language is in some sense a sort of theater, an inner and outer theater, it's as if to me no ideological system could be, it's like all that language can do is point to what is beyond it. In wondering how a personality moves, it's as if we return to the original world that personality extended from. And then from an original state, we wonder about the relationship of the mind with the world. And we are left at two crossroads. There's this concept of an endless update of intelligence, imagine a natural update. And then imagine a sort of system where it's as if, intelligence is a system. For example, we look at the human being, it's a biological system. And now, if the system updates, there is continuity. If the system doesn't update, there's discontinuity. Now, something interesting, that means, for example, evolution is, in some sense, you can say, think of it this way, evolution is an endless update, or that's the intention of the concept. But when we look at what in this world is looping, there's something bizarre. Most beliefs come from the past, and what's fascinating, belief systems, is that the moment the person chooses to believe in the past, they are simultaneously choosing not to believe in the present and the future. But if they choose to believe in the present, they will access possibilities of the future and the past. And if the person aligns themselves with the future of the species, I am telling you, it's as if we found a purpose for karma, rather than karma being our purpose due to self-origin of action or intent or some sort of energetic movement. If we wanted to see a sort of theological parallel to what I mean by an endlessly updating system and, let's say, a looping system, an endlessly looping system, this is the concept of heaven and hell. I find this is it. Hell is when new dimensions are not being added, as if the person made a mistake that caused them to in some sense, be in a loop. Okay, so we have this idea of, an endless, eternal paradise and a sort of hell loop, right? And of course, people are going to be like, Mr.Within, don't you know Dante Alighieri, set up the type of cultural atmosphere for like the pictures or the depiction of what hell is. And I will tell you, it's very simple. The best way I have come to terms with this idea of heaven and hell is that heaven is efficiency, hell is inefficiency. A looping system will become inefficient over time. Do you know that means a system that doesn't update? They even say this for entrepreneurs, that when they start a business, if they don't adjust to the market, they are in some sense doomed by their own emotions. I remember I went to film school. I'm a graduate of TFS. And when I was at film school, I was thinking like, the teachers are going to motivate me, they're going to be like, keep going, kid, you got potential, But what ended up happening was that I learned one of the most demotivational lessons of my life. It's like, have you ever been so motivated? Now imagine, have you ever been so demotivated? Now, the lesson was that they told me, don't fall in love with your artwork. I would write all these sci-fi scripts, and in some sense they weren't possible to make. Or they were possible, but kind of impossible to others. And the teacher told me, don't fall in love with your artwork. And that was very profound for me. Why? Because to me, the ego is falling in love with the artwork of the mind. I think that's one of the best sentences I've ever said. To me, we have to be very conscious of looping systems and updating systems, okay? I'm not saying I'm a master at this. I'm not claiming like I'm, I'm the Midas of another dimension. All I'm saying is there are imperfections in life, there are perfections. There are unknown variables, there are known variables. Any idea or concept put through this filter of the known and unknown makes the value of the impossible equal the possible. That means somebody was like, in some sense, what does impossible mean? Impossible means when you do it, it's possible. What does possible mean? It's as if you haven't done it yet. To me, the human being, just like the body is like consuming food for energy, I feel that the mind doesn't have a stomach like the brain doesn't. Like there is no sort of digestion, but there is absorption of information. And what the brain is doing is trying to pinpoint itself in the void. Just take that in, whoever you are listening to me. Let's say right now you wanted to map the cosmos. Your starting point is unknown. And a looping system is a system that fears the evolution of the past. Okay? This is why many people who get into, let's say there's different emotional states or psychological states, and let's say there's someone with a sad psychological state and someone with a happy psychological state, and then we're wondering about the difference of these psychological states. We would see that the happy person is very open to receiving new dimensions on reality. The sad person wants to push themselves away from a world that in some sense rejected them. Right? The biggest psychological problem on the planet is that human beings are not being acknowledged for the inner potential that they can only see. And one of the tasks of an advanced civilization is to make the world such a great place that great ideas would instantly activate on the planet. Dear listeners, we are not an object only, and we are not a subject only, and we are that rare species among all the other creatures. Just take this in. Among all the other species on this planet, the behavior of the human being has been the most extraterrestrial. We have claimed ourselves as terrestrial because we stood up from the dirt, but I am telling you, the behavior, it's as if the body is from Earth, the mind is from the sky. Right? They would say in ancient mythology, Mother Earth and Father Sky. I feel that the mind is actually a sort of galactic technology and extraterrestrial influence. The body is terrestrial, right? It's as if the mind is the child of, poetically, it's like the child of its own heaven and hell. Right? I don't know how to say it. It's as if like, I'll share with listeners, and hopefully with, please keep in mind I'm respectfully sharing this. For me, there was something very interesting in the Islamic tradition, when I was exposed to culture in the Middle East. And there is this hadith, and I don't know if people know that much about Islam in the Western world, but pretty much, I'll tell you, there is the holy book, the Quran, and then there is the hadith, which is, in some sense, the peaceful prophet's words, right? And so, there's an idea here where it's a story ascribed to the Prophet of Islam when he was young. And so the Prophet of Islam, evidently when he was 4 years old or something of that sort, and excuse me if I'm getting this wrong, but I'm sharing it for the implication of the idea. pretty much there was this idea that the prophet at a very young age, every child, they had this notion, this cultural attitude where they were like, back in the day, they were like children that are born. Like a reason children are crying is because like shaitan, like the devil pinches them, right? And when the devil pinches them, it's as if like they are kind of given their chaotic attributes. Now there's this story that the prophet was in some sense like a young kid walking, with a bunch of other kids, and then all the other kids come screaming, and the story goes evidently the archangel Ezrael comes down and in some sense grabs like the chaos and the chaotic attributes from the heart of the prophet when he was a child. Right, so there's this story that it's as if like this human being had been, by the hand of an archangel, the sin of his lifetime had been taken away. Right, it's another way of saying that his chaos left him early on. You see, the more something becomes mindless, we treat it as chaotic. The more something is mindful, we treat it as in some sense ordered, organized, structure-oriented, proper intent-oriented. Now, when a person thinks about the chaos, what the chaos is in some sense unconscious acceptance. Now, what order is in some sense conscious acceptance of reality. Or excuse me, a better way to even polish the sentence would be that chaos is unconscious rejection and order is conscious acceptance. And what I'm trying to tell you is that there is pretty much in every human being a sort of good self and a bad self, a chaotic self and an ordered self. The more you went back, these were real things. The more you come back to 2022, the abstraction of the past was in some sense their best approach, Anyways, to continue, it doesn't matter who you are. Consciousness is a permission for existence to experience itself ultimately. When I think about how I perceived the notion of a personality when I was young and how I perceive language now, sometimes I get shocked, guys. I sometimes feel at some point in this life, it's as if I started living another life. It's poetically as if when your mind tries a strategy and then the strategy doesn't work and it resets its own value system to try another strategy. For some people, they call this enlightenment. For others, it's in some sense you manage to look a different way. Really, this world is filled, it is a system. I mean, we can't ignore it. It's 100% a system, and it's a system where there's a subjective value and an objective value. The objective value of the system of human beings is that there's individual consciousness, a sort of microcosm of humanity, and then there's the collective consciousness, which is the macrocosm of the humanity. If you pay attention to the behavior of the microcosm and the macrocosm, or if you see like a group of ants like moving sugar cubes and and you're just staring at them, it's as if the ants are playing the role of the microcosm and they don't even know human beings are looking at them, right? So it's as if another way of saying the micro dimension to a system, to let's say a complete system, its micro dimension just plays its part. It doesn't know how the macro dimensions are behaving. Similarly, when we look at the human being, it's as if some people are going to be like, when's this collective humanity coming, Mr. Within? And I'll be like, if we behave actually to build an advanced civilization, our faith should be instantaneous, right? This is something that people who learn single-pointedness and concentration, they have instantaneous faith. It's like such a cool ability to learn. Like I could probably You know, if I ever held a workshop, I could teach this to people. It's like very quickly, right? I always share all that I can, you know, before the day ends usually. You know, seldom do they say this. Greatness is not a photograph. Greatness is an effort that is behaving like an infinite being. You see, we have one lifetime, dear listeners. We can choose to play the game of misery. We can choose to play the game of might. And we can choose to play the game of ultimate advancement. I am telling you, you know, some nights I find myself lonely, sometimes feeling that have I made a mistake in this lifetime, or, you know, has the percentage of mistakes, is the ratio of mistakes to, you know, smart actions kind of like the same, you know? It's like, I sometimes wonder if I am a fool, or, you know, a sort of like, you know, a fool of a lesser dimension, you know? But I have realized that the ultimate compassion knows itself beyond boundary. There is a freedom here which has nothing to do with how the world sculpts an object. You know, there's a freedom beyond matter, and there's a freedom even beyond mind. And mind and matter, mind and body, is another way of saying space and matter, consciousness, Purusha and Prakriti. In Vedic thought, this is simultaneous. That means if there was a game show, imagine, like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire or something, or I don't know, some game show, and they were like, we have a question, did consciousness come first or did matter? Did awareness, did space come first or matter, right? And imagine there was an answer space, there was an answer matter, and then there was an answer both of the above, or all of the above. And the yogis would say all of the above, because without your mind, whose body? And without your body, where is the mind? Personality is projected based on the world you actually see. Right? And the greatest thing, I was saying this to my brother, I have a twin brother, and I was saying this to him, that like I was telling him about who I think on the planet will be drawn towards what, you know, in 2022 they thought was spirituality, but in 2422 it would just be advanced communication. Pretty much I told my brother that imagine on this planet all these human beings being born, there is something called a decency resonance, and those who can be content with their decency, they can be unconditionally decent, it's as if that's when the work of greater dimensions begins. You see, if the world is not just what we see, then what we see is not enough to know it. To me, I feel there's some sort of collective alchemy at work. Some part of me feels like, why are so many why is pretty much billions of people, you know, on social media, right? Like, I think about that. I think about, like, where is nature going? It is obviously going towards a cyber life, which is another way of saying nature tried to escape the natural by becoming non-natural. And now it has become the unnatural. It notices the different and seeks out the natural. Human beings are such fascinating creatures that we can notice the unknown. I am telling you, people think like, I'm just saying the word unknown. No, guys. The unknown is the privilege granted to the human consciousness. When you look at all species, all lesser species than the human being, they don't care. They are in looped systems. The biological instinct and the environment lock down the consciousness in the loop of its behavior. But the human species, it can be conscious of its mortality. It can be conscious, it has the ability to name itself. You know, I have yet to see, for example, a lion roar and somebody shout like, "Lion!" You know, and then the lion's like, "Wait a minute, man, my name's not Lion. My name's Billy." You know, like the lion doesn't name itself. The human being names the world. The human being subjectifies reality to move it before it moves in it. There's a poetry to the world, and we, based on our every action, we're choosing to contribute to a loop, or in some sense break the chain, you know. Where would objective evolution go infinite years from now? Where can subjective evolution go infinite years from now? And after matter has infinitely changed in space, what would space do? You know, imagine human beings realize space is alive. Okay, just like imagine, like, you know, like that, who's that guy, like Frankenstein idea, right, where this guy makes like some sort of like beast, some sort of monster, and then the monster becomes conscious, and then he's like, it's alive, right? So to me, the space is not a monster, that's just a story, but in reality space is alive, because life for the mind is awareness based prior to subject or object analysis. That means prior to how the mind does anything to know itself, it is being itself. So if it trusts that it knows itself, it can properly be itself. You know, imagine you're this kid in Japan looking at the sky, you know, and you're like, it's such a quiet night, and then you see this. It's the evolution of purpose. Everything is attention. The human being is how their mind is moving their body. You know, nobody says my body moved my mind today, you know? I mean, nobody says my mind moved my body today, but you know what I mean? Like, you know, the mind is valued greater than the body. But the mind is not an object, so its value can only just be in the act of free will. It's as if, imagine somebody says, hey man, you got free will, do it yourself, you know. But when you ask where is the free will, it's like the mind movement. Sometimes it's fascinating to just feel that the planet we're standing on, how many civilizations have come and gone. Like, you know how there's some people who are like mediums, okay? and mediums, they feel like they connect to the spirit of those who've passed away. To me, I feel like I can feel all the species, all the civilizations that have risen and fallen on this earth. It's a feeling. It's a feeling as if many have walked this path. But how many have walked it in ways the world has never seen? That is true art. The rediscovery of novelty. The brain is simulating waves. The brain is honestly like another heart. Like, that's hilarious, do you know? Our brain is generating waves and the heart is beating. You know, this is something that I think maybe a lot of, neurologists, maybe they focus on it, I don't know. But I have this feeling that the biggest mystery to neurology should be how much of the psychology of this creature is rhythm-oriented. That means, I don't know, I mean, I don't know, maybe Neil deGrasse Tyson can answer this. But if a person had two giant mirrors, rectangular mirrors facing each other, or let's say you had a giant rectangular cylinder, or sphere, and somehow somebody had managed to get a light beam bouncing in this sphere, okay, in this kind of like, let's say inner mirror sphere. That means inside the sphere is like pure mirror, and there's a light bouncing in there, let's say. We've trapped light in a spherical mirror, in a sphere with an interiorized mirror. And now, imagine that this light is hitting, this mirror, and it's moving, and we're wondering how, like, light is working. This could be a good strategy to understand light, actually. A bit savage strategy. It's as if like who was it? I think it was Neil's Neil Baum. I forget the guy's name. Okay, but it was this quantum physicist. They asked him about quantum physics, and he was like, "Hey man, it's like we've caged a jaguar, right? A tiger, and then we're wondering about like, yo, this is the tiger, but the tiger is only the tiger when it's in its natural environment. That means some experiments cannot be conducted because they intervene with what the thing actually is, right? So they become, let's say, for the sake of language, divergent properties in nature. They diverge from nature, right? It's very fascinating, and so much of life is just information coming and going. Like it's even hilarious. I shouldn't say desire, but I would say my inner potential probability, or I should say my vision of what can happen on this earth, is that I want the species to not just fall in love with its destiny, but at the same time to ask questions that in some sense pierce the sky, as if like 8 billion human beings activated. That's like 8 billion Excaliburs pulled from the stone. The kings and queens of all the inner realms, they begin to serve the true royalty of the outer earth. It's as if behind your eyes an advanced civilization is already there. It's only in front of our eyes where the work needs to be done. And the beautiful, brilliant thing, like, people don't realize 50% of the work, of the purpose of the human being has been completed. And this is not just because it existed, but it's because it already knows what it needs to do. You see, that's the quality of a natural being. It is not signalless from its environment. It receives its world. You know, you can have, let's say, the most foolish person, the most intelligent person, the let's say most cruel person, the most kind person, let's say the most angry person, most calm person, you know. And it's as if it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter on some level, because ultimately it's a moving force in a moving storyline. It's as if they told the person, hey man, you failed, you know, and the person's like, how do you know? Do you know? And then the person's like, don't you know you failed? And the person's like, nobody knows I have failed or not. You know, as long as there is some sort of force that is alive, it's as if the victory is there. Do you see? It's as if sometimes I have reached a sort of mystical, philosophical self-inquiry where I've asked myself, why am I even in these eyes? Why is this world here right now, here for me, and why am I here for the world? And the beautiful thing is that actually this is like a sort of, believe it or not, cheat code to the psychological entity, you know, where the psychological entity wonders about the overall value of life. The microcosm, you know, has to acknowledge the macrocosm, or it will lose its humility. Why these eyes? And you know what my answer is? Because this is what this moment that I am being in the universal sector deserves. You know, so many people go to like these sages. I know this in Tibetan Buddhism, and they're like, sage, tell me like my, you know, what am I going to be in my future life, right? And then the sage, I don't know, meditates and says, you're going to be okay, you know. But in reality, what it is all of that becomes unnecessary. I personally feel before any human being exits this system, it might be worth a try to wonder about at maybe, let's say, completing it's as if there's actually 4 universes, and we need to succeed in these 4 universes. Imagine one universe, very obvious in front of your eyes, the outer realms. We have another universe, the inner realms, but the inner realms is divided by time. And so we have the past, present, and future. So technically, even though the body is existing in the present, but the mind is capable enough to fathom existence in the past and the potential of existence in the future. You know, nobody can act like, you know, they're from the future, right? But everybody can invent, because that's what the future will do. In the future generations, problem solving is going to be something completely different to them. You know, like they're going to read in history books back in the future that's like, oh my God, human beings in 2022 believed in this concept of problems, and everybody was worshiping this concept of problems. You know, not realizing it is our own mask. You see, life can mean anything when you realize there is an awareness watching it. Like right now as I'm talking, like, you know, people are listening to me, and let's see if the quickest mystical inquiry is possible, in the sense that whoever you are listening to me right now, for a second pause the story of life and wonder about what is it that's listening to my voice right now. And you're going to notice what I mean when I say we are an unknown attention looking out through our eyes. That's when you become comfortable with the unknown, the ego is liberated. People think there's an ego death, but I would say there's a liberation. It's not like the ego dies. The ego is kind of like, you can say, like the sound that the body makes. To me, Civilization 1.0 is looping in its misery. Civilization 2.0, as I have envisioned, is free to acknowledge the never ending. You know, honestly, in order, like, if the species fears extinction, if, let's say, we don't go extinct, what's the option? A never ending story. And you know, life is hilarious. It's not that we're living for the future only so the future generations succeed. It's that when you look at life, it's just a play of forces. If you're a materialist, it's a play of elements. If you're an immaterialist, it's the play of the divine. If you're an advanced communicator, no idea can be the inconceivable presence of the experiencer. Imagine there was a man who claimed that there was a philosopher in the future who claims that, you know, he has never failed. And people are like, what is this? This guy has the audacity to say he's never failed, right? And then they go confront the guy, this philosopher, and they say, why have you never failed? You know, how can you say that? And the person's like, in order for me to fail, I need to first know who I am. If I don't know who I am, how do I know who failed? That means if we don't know what we truly are, what sort of truth are we seeking in the outer realms? Can someone please tell me? You know, what sort of worship game? Honestly, it's a creature that has an ability to point its attention, to pilot its attention. And when you pilot your attention in the inner realms, we call that communication. You know, and when you pilot your attention in the outer realms, that is known as the civilized behavior of the human being. You see, violence doesn't make sense because the mind has access to greater realities of mobility. Imagine there was a violent kid, and anytime this kid was violent, the parent shouted, use your words, you know? And so eventually the kid had no choice but to express, you know, the feelings through language. Honestly, the human being is an instrument, guys. Just like you move the strings of the instrument, there's a sound, right? It's as if how the human being receives the world, accepts the world, it leads to the music that their soul in some sense becomes. The best advantage that the human species has in its retaliation against the void is the ability of discovering the new novelty. And the other great advantage that the human species has is that it can reset its perception. You know what it is that it's a game of change. What that means is in front of our eyes, the world is changing at a certain pace. And then behind our eyes, the world changes with a certain rhythm of brain simulation. So what I'm trying to tell people, it's not like when you wake up and, all that time you lived until you go back to sleep at the end of the day. It's as if in all that time, it wasn't that you were just being the idea of yourself. It's actually that we are so content with being an unknown witness that we have ignored how it's there. It's as if, there is no spiritual people, there is the spirit that moves people. If somebody says, Mr.Within, do you believe you have one soul that has journeyed through the cosmos to get here? And I will tell you, believe it or not, guys, first of all, how I consider myself is actually there is no attributes to it. That means it's like in my most silent and still moment of being, I am the silence and stillness of being. You see, freedom through shape is an endless game, but freedom through space is instantaneous liberation. You see, it's as if pretty much you free the world from yourself and you free yourself from the world, and then you can be any self in any world, and then you realize you have experienced the edge of the simulation of perception. There isn't, believe it or not, I don't want to say there isn't much to do here, but that there isn't, I think, aside from 4 major angles, there's nothing else that conception can do beyond that. We either acknowledge the void, the 0 dimension. We acknowledge the singular, the 1 dimension. We acknowledge the dual, the 2 dimension. We acknowledge the infinite dimension, which is the infinity symbol. And it's a circle. This model I'm sharing with you, I call it the ring of the absent heaven. Really, energy is interacting with the world while at the same time being it. And emotions are created based on how much the inner realms and outer realms go in sync or out of sync. It's a synchronization. It's brilliant, actually. They say existence is a miracle. But I'm telling you, the concept of a miracle is a miracle. The conceptual position of the realm is a miracle. It's so fascinating that right now, as I'm speaking, it's an organization. It's a collection of cells, which at their core are elements. It's remarkable. It's like, how rappers have gang signs where they're trying to represent something. It's as if, imagine chemists representing the periodic table because they're being it. So, I guess one last point is that they say, hopefully I get this right, they say, let's start it from this way. What the sociologist doesn't know, in some sense, goes to the psychologist. That means when the sociologist doesn't know what to do, it goes to the psychologist. When the psychologist doesn't know what to do, or excuse me, I got that wrong. When the sociologist doesn't know what to do, it goes to the scientist. When the scientist doesn't know what to do, it goes to the psychologist. When the psychologist doesn't know what to do, it goes to the philosopher. What the philosopher doesn't know what to do, the philosopher goes to the mystic. What the mystic doesn't know what to do is the ultimate state where the grand mystery of enlightenment begins. Enlightenment is not something for a known world. Enlightenment is the discovery of the inseparability of your unknown self with the unknown world, right? And when you realize this, you get redefined. That means enlightenment is just like Transformers in the movie. In the movie Transformers, the robots just transformed, like a car transformed into a robot. It's as if when the Buddha got enlightened under the tree, he realized that the cause of suffering is desire, and desire is the reaction of a sense of self to the environment, to the immediate moment. I sometimes feel like I am in the trenches of civilization 1.0 at the moment. One day I hopefully, the universal sector authorizes me to, in some sense, walk in palaces, of the ears of the nation. But what I mean by this is that regardless of how big the system is, the system is the sum of its parts. How advanced human civilization would be is based on the advancement of every individual. And so you begin seeking the advancement of your inner realms, and then you become liberated enough to seek advancement in the outer realms. And then once the outer realms and inner realms are synchronized, it's like a bird flapping its wings at the same time. Right now, it's like everything is so shape and color oriented, it's ridiculous. All the isms in culture are because of puzzle pieces that don't match. But every puzzle piece has a purpose. That means if there's one puzzle piece missing, we cannot say we have completed the puzzle. I just wish somehow in the next 10 years, very big global networks begin that are not promoting an agenda of belief, but they are actually global networks, which in some sense, it's as if the biggest entertainment. People don't realize this. Right now, media is focusing on fiction. Oh my God, leave fiction for the artists. The biggest role of this is my prediction of the future of TV, guys, just the future of media. I feel what's gonna happen is that people are going to feel this feeling within themselves that nature, that some part of the human evolution is moving away from nature. This feeling is going to become unbearable, and what's going to happen in the future for technology is that people are going to get tired of fantasy. Fantasy, maybe this isn't the best word, but it's like lubricating civilization. It's like how normality exists because we have the opposite, you know. And so this is causing a sort of fluid motion of civilization. Why? Because in some sense the future, you know, requires to be born. The future of media is going to go back to the educational system. And when the educational system and media, in some sense, unite, like these two kingdoms unite, when these kingdoms unite, what's gonna happen is that reality is going to be our access to the surreal rather than the artificial. The idea is to activate the freedom of the ability of a universal sector. Do you see? That means, imagine, you know, the Milky Way galaxy was under attack and Earth was an advanced civilization, and in some sense there was this galactic command for the whole galaxy to defend itself. It's as if how many beings from how many different civilizations would move to protect the galaxy. It would be as if like all civilizations in the galaxy unite to defend their galaxy. Do you understand that? That right now we're like on a rock and we can't even have a bunch of you know, abstract it's like we have nations right now. Like we haven't realized we're all being one human species on the planet. Like we haven't chosen that as the most simple, essential way to view life, right? But we're watching it as, in some sense, we're branding it. And you know what's bizarre? Whichever culture a person is born in, everybody has a different DNA. Do you see? There has never been, it's as if in the psychology of civilization 1.0 to itself is that people are being people, but we're realizing nobody is the same. We're all occupying a moment in the space-time continuum. Just take that in. Nobody can ever understand each other because the starting point of our eyes is somewhere where no one else can be because we're being there. Do you see what I'm saying? Everybody is unique. Everybody has a hidden world behind their eyes where the moment they discover the honor within, I am telling you, like imagine waking up and feeling, you know, the smile of a universe. It's just like the edge of majesty, you know, the edge of the majestic. It's as if a human being that lived life in such a way that at the end of his death he bowed to all that existed and all that could be experienced, and in some sense he left. You see, there's beauty in absence as much as there's beauty in presence. Do you know? For now, any being in this universal sector, sometimes I feel I'm just calling out to anything in the universal sector, not even chaos and order. Like that shit is like tools. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it's as if we don't update how our past is defining our present, it's another way of saying the past has chosen to occupy the present. So it's another way of saying, let's say 1,000 years ago, people said you gotta live like XYZ. And so, 1,000 years later, if you live like XYZ, the world has already seen XYZ. They haven't seen, for example, ZYX. You know what I'm saying? What I'm trying to tell people is, even the religious people on the planet, that modern appreciation of religion, if it chooses to be humble, it has to accept that we don't know for certain what the meaning of this divine revelation is, right? To me, see, there's a contradiction in religion, which it's just something to be aware of, that religion says, in some sense, the book is the word of God. the holy books or the word of God, that means it's such a divine relic, or it's such a divine thing that it's God. That means it's God's voice, and God is inconceivable. Do you understand? It's as if the religion is saying we believe in an inconceivable God, but we're gonna behave on its conceivable words. Imagine there was a holy book that just said, in some sense, in order to worship God, you have to, in some sense, just, live. It doesn't have to be past artificial robotic behaviors. It has to be true moments, right? Because, something people don't know, right? People identify spirituality with blasphemy, and there are, sure, from the religious Abrahamic angle, sure, there are some spiritual traditions which are, let's say, they fit the category of blasphemy. But I'm telling you, when it comes to understanding the spirit, after we accept that it's inconceivable, we are left to entertain the archetype of an explorer. That means if we say, is an explorer a bad idea in religion? No. Is an explorer a bad idea in secular society? No. Right? It's as if the explorer guided, it was as if God guided the explorer. It's like a very divine state. Like all the prophets, they did something nobody else did. That's an exploration. It's as if it's another way of saying those who explore the new or try to find the new, they receive revelation before anybody else. And it's not that I'm trying to say that the religious text isn't meaningful. I'm just saying religious people are saying like this is divine, this is from God, but then they're acting like they can understand it, right? The idea is like, if we can understand it, how is it from an inconceivable God? And the ability of God is instantaneous being, right? What I'm trying to say is that if we take out the cultural dimension, God is not a person. Do you understand? And so even if God from the cultural dimension was a person in the clouds or some source, some sort of son of the universe, I would say that it's like saying God is the potential of the world. And the activation of the new, that means of all our ancestors, right? Like this is the most bizarre thing, right? Like everybody who has a religious ancestor, if you live religiously into like now, right, your ancestors would wake up and say, good job, right? But if let's say, for example, and this is hypothetical, but I'm saying now, imagine those people who their ancestors weren't religious, they would in some sense open their eyes and be like, okay, these guys did something different than we did, right? Like you see, so many people honor their ancestors, but they never wonder if their ancestors would honor their behavior now, right? To me, anything that has made it to 2022 saw way ahead of 2022, desired way ahead of 2022. It's just on some level bizarre, guys. It's like all these different DNAs, all these different ways that behavior can activate on the planet, all the ways that people become people when their free will decides to act. Like, isn't that remarkable? We're living in a garden of endless, I would say countless types of behavior. There's so many ways to behave on a planet that a psychologist would go crazy if they tried to, Imagine that there was a great psychologist on the planet, and this psychologist managed to, somehow make 8 billion human beings like no longer have like psychological problems, right? But then they come to the psychologist and they're like, okay, now the planet has a mind evidently, and so how do you fix the psychology of a planet? How do you fix the psychology of a galaxy? It's as if then it reaches the macrocosm, it reaches the edge. You know what's beautiful? When a person tries something way beyond, I'll give you an example for me. When I decided to give 10,000 talks, I didn't know if it's possible or not. But for me, it was so grand that I would say, in my mind, I was like, what would that state of mind of somebody who's given 10,000 talks be? And then I realized it would be somebody who in some sense has mastered language movement. And what language is an image, ultimately. Words are like symbols that are connected to events in nature. There is no right and wrong because we don't know what and how the past actually happened. All we know is that there were certain echoes of the voices of long ago. And there is no right and wrong, guys, if you have an artist's mentality. Do you know? That means this is something where I don't have children, but I thought if I did, I would raise them as artists. You know? And the purpose of the artist is to see something new. You see, novelty means you're sacrificing the conviction of the past of its own future to actually see in how many different ways the future can happen. For me, I would say that a part of me, ever since hearing the concept of God, it's never like I've had a feeling of denying it. For me, it was like this notion of like there is something else other than me and all human beings here. It was like a pleasant thought. But now I have come to realize that to honor the inconceivable is not to mistake yourself for the divine will. You see, it's like a composer, a conductor, right, in an orchestra. And imagine midway the conductor is conducting and the conductor's like, I'm gonna go play the violin now, and all the other musicians are like, yo, conductor, where are you going? We're in the middle of this, right? To me, the human being felt so alone in the cosmos that it did not only need to create the concept of a god, but it needed to create the concept that it would go there. For me, there's something so divine, which I would say it predates language. It's the rhythms of the living earth. Like, honestly, guys, just think about how much of the way you have moved in this life has been conscious and how much of it has been unconscious. It's like we don't think about our heart, it beats. We don't think about our lungs, it breathes, you know? I don't know what it is, but I feel like something's happening on the planet. I feel that we have reached that point of the evolution of the information age where human beings are more fascinated with the potential access to the question of what they are. Right? What I'm trying to say is that something strange has happened. You know, it's as if we have reached a point where not only philosophers are required to enter the civilization, like more than anything now, this world needs philosophers to keep the potential of not known alive. But I'm saying it also needs mystics, and who mystics are human beings who have had enough experiences with the unknown to realize the unknown is here. When I say the unknown is here, it's like I'm telling you there's something here that nobody knows, but it's here. And the effort of consciousness will lead us to it. Behind our eyes, beyond the clouds of the realms of memory and imagination. Freedom is a sky of sight, and the sky has no edge. There has never been anything to fear. There has just been infinite ways to move. It's as if human beings have imagined a day comes where we fear fear, where we hate hatred, where extinction goes extinct, the idea of extinction. Do you see? It's as if, what are the options? They say go big or go home. And a human species is not going big, and it's just assuming the earth is its home. It's like some silly, childlike behavior of a species not realizing, that beyond the comfortable domains of reality, it's as if there is something that surpasses the conceptual entity. There's forces here, guys. And these forces doesn't mean our fiction has come true. It doesn't mean our fantasies have come true. It just means that in order to establish an unknown relationship with the unknown world as a known entity, the known entity has to realize the source of its known individualism is an unknown. I'm trying to tell you, before your first memory, you were not a subject watching your first memory happen. Jordan Peterson, I remember somebody asked him about God, and this was a YouTube video I actually searched. I was like, what is this man's view on God? And he said something very strange. He said he acts as if he believes in God. And then I thought about, okay, what does that mean? That's kind of saying like yes and no at the same time, And then I thought about it, and I realized it's that we don't know what will happen if we believe, and we don't know what will happen if we disbelieve. And the hilarious thing is, whatever we do, we don't know what will happen, right? And really, it's just the presence of intelligence. Loneliness blooms into solitude when a universal sector's life is lost. If a person accepts, let's say, an empty world, then it's as if yourself is meaningless in it. Like, a huge argument can be made that nihilists are too lazy to think. If we don't care to update the system, we're most likely looping. The evolution of a looping system is to become a spiral system, but then it's an updated system. To live life like a spiral rather than just a circle. Imagine, instead of people saying the circle of life, like singing that shit, excuse my language, but instead instead of people singing about the circle of life, imagine some mathematician was like, wait a minute, the spiral of life deserves the spotlight too, We're honestly just energy's way of knowing it's alive, it's been energy. It's a mystery, guys. Enjoy the mystery of life. It is, the privilege of eons into now. It's a blessing. It's a blessing to recognize you have an existential role to how the whole species experiences itself. The future generations are just like sitting with popcorn on in an auditorium and being like, when is 2022 the great performance of all the roaring souls? When does it start? I'm giving so many talks on the advanced civilization that if I'm an old man and civilization doesn't advance, it's as if I'll be like, yo man, this we just have to create a world where it's just so smart that it can't fail. Right? It's another way of saying, like, what's an efficient strategy to an advanced civilization? We start building backup systems for the future generations. It's like, this is what I'm going to tell you. Media is going to become an encyclopedia. And schools are going to become a video game in the future. These are two predictions I have confidence in that they will probably go. And do you know, the moment we discover a new dimension to human intelligence, do you know how bizarre that would be to our psychologists? Psychologists are going to be like, oh my god, this whole time, let's say, they're like, I've been basing my certainty based on, brain scans, based on neural accuracy. But in some sense, how we attribute a personality to the movement of neurons is by far, it's either the greatest, work of fiction, or it is in some sense, the hardest, the impossible non-fiction. We have to love our world in order to understand it. Sometimes I think that, there's some people, let's say you just think you're a good person and you just do what you believe is good. Based on, let's say either a book or, somebody telling you or something. Right? And let's say you keep telling yourself, I'm a good person. You know what ends up happening? The world shows you that you can never be a thought. You can never be a concept. That's the revelation of just the breathing organism in a changing world. It's like, before it believes truth, the truth is moving. It's like, it's like a portrait artist being like, it's like a portrait artist, trying to draw the world on a moving train, and the artist is like, how am I gonna finish this thing? Anyways, I'm gonna go into a quote tunnel by a man who is, in my view, pretty enlightened, guys. If somebody was like Mr. Within, do you know any enlightened people on YouTube? I'd be like, yeah, this guy. His name is Papaji. His lectures are very incredible and thought-provoking in order to understand the psychology of Vedanta. The proper psychology of Vedanta. But I'm going to read his quotes right now. And it's kind of an honor for me to actually do this. And something important to know There was a lineage to this. First it was Shiro Mamarshi, then it was Papaji, then it's Muji, and I don't know who the next guy's gonna be. But I think the next guy's gonna be Russell Brand. Muji's next disciple might be Russell Brand, guys. I don't know. But I think that could be possible. Anyways, to the quotes shared by the beloved Papaji, the man who I would say in my lifetime, when I saw his videos, he reminded me of something I knew before I was anything. That is the brilliance of this guy's teachings. But anyways, I'll read his quotes. Papaji says, whatever comes, let it come. Whatever stays, let it stay. Whatever goes, let it go. Papaji says, if there's peace in your mind, you will find peace with everybody. If your mind is agitated, you will find agitation everywhere. So first find peace within, and you will see this inner peace reflected everywhere else. You are this peace. Papaji says you are the unchangeable awareness in which all activity takes place. There you go. This one sentence is a masterpiece of literature. This is going to go on the title of the video, guys. Hold on. This guy just hit a home run. I think fellow philosophers would appreciate it. But anyways, I'll give a comment on it. Papaji says you are the unchangeable awareness in which all activity takes place. And some guy, imagine his whole life, he's like, I thought I was a name suffering. I was a suffering personality, but guess what? It's like everything's been happening in the presence of an unchangeable awareness. That, dear listeners, is the soul, and I welcome you to it. That is the true. When you get close to the Turiya state, it's in the Rebhu Gita, it speaks of the bewildered beast, the human being, evolving human being going through three major states: the conscious waking state, the dream state, the deep sleep state. Now, the phenomenal, fascinating thing about this is that in the deep sleep state, you are nobody and nobody's suffering or enjoying or all that. There's just absence. But what's fascinating is that they say there's a fourth state called Turiya. And in this fourth state, this is in yoga, in the fourth state, what is happening is that you are aware, it's like you have discovered this unchangeable awareness, which is the common denominator in the first state, second state, and the third state. That unchangeable awareness is the reality of the soul. That means if somebody says to you, hey man, it's like, have you seen the soul? The person's like, I have noticed where it's all being placed. Where is the event of the meaning of the world occurring? It would be fascinating to discover the glow of your own mind, like a candle in a dark closet. Anyways, back to the quote tunnel. That ocean of eternal peace is you. What is the difficulty that we suffer from? It is that we seek peace elsewhere and do not experience that we are peace incarnate itself. Papaji says, look within. There is no difference between yourself, the self with a capital S, and Guru. You are always free. There is no teacher. There is no student. There is no teaching. Papaji says, when you stop thinking, you're no longer imagining things that are not true. And that's another way of saying when you can notice how you have an inner realms and you're not the inner realms. It's as if the yin-yang circle it contains both the yin and the yang. So when you identify with the circle, it's kind of like Papaji says, you stop thinking, you're no longer imagining things that are not true, because the presence of the moment has declassified truth into a singular meaning. But anyways, I'll continue. Now is the time to have a direct introduction to this moment. This moment is free of time, of mind, of any notions. Introduce yourself to this moment. Let your will burn in this fire so that it takes you nowhere else. Let yourself be burned in this fire of eternity, love and peace. Don't be afraid of this fire. It is love itself. This desire for freedom is the fire of love. Papaji says, detach yourself from those things which are not permanent and rest in that which is always permanent. Papaji says, surrounded by nothingness, you have to do nothing. You have to do nothing to be who you are, nothing at all. Papaji says, when you know that you are meditating, it is not meditation. Because ultimately it's the inseparability of the individual activity with the cosmic activity. That means meditation, proper meditation is another way of saying a human being was chill enough to realize that what is known is actually an unknown occurrence. Everything that we think is known can be simultaneously happening and based on an unknown source. The mysteries of the realm are fascinating, guys. It's as if like there's so much uncharted territory, and the pilots of consciousness, the world awaits them. Great beings are going to be born in the future, guys. I'm just holding the door open for them. Papaji says you have to simply become aware of the movement of the mind, which begins this endless trouble. Papaji says nobody wants to work, not even the breath wants to work. Papaji says if you see the illusion, you're enlightened, but if you think that you're enlightened, you are in the illusion. Papaji says one is always free and one is always alone. The mind is only daydreaming. The sentence is hilarious. It's like somebody saying, are you suffering? The person's like, nah, man, my mind's just, doing its thing. But it's a powerful sentence anyways. Papaji says one is always free and one is always alone. The mind is only daydreaming. The mind is only dreaming. Excuse me if I said daydreaming before. Anyways, Papaji says if you identify with what comes and goes, you will be unhappy. If you identify with what is permanent and always there, you are happiness itself. Papaji says, look here and know who you are. Instantly you will find freedom. And this suffering hitchhiking from womb to womb will instantly stop. The only way is to look within. That's kind of like such a next level statement. Hitchhiking from womb to womb. That's kind of like, he means reincarnation. That means Papaji is saying, hey, reincarnating entity, have you noticed you are being the whole world yet? But as when I say you're being it, you're in the presence of the world. But a human being is not being everything, but it is being present with everything. That's the presence. Anyways, Papaji says meditation is to effortlessly turn the mind toward that energy which energizes the mind. Papaji says keep quiet, don't touch the thoughts, let them be. Papaji says the way to live a happy, beautiful life is to accept whatever comes and not care about what does not come. Papaji says if you address the mind with, in quotations, who are you, it will disappear. Papaji says what is the purpose of human life? To return home. In my school of thought, in Mr.Within school of thought, I would say that would be advancement beyond the language threshold. I've envisioned that it's going to become important 3,600 years from now. Like I've just felt to give it a number. Papaji says, understanding and not understanding are all in the scheme of ignorance. just the realm of the mind. This is not learning. This is your birthright. You cannot study to be what you are. You do not need to understand in order to breathe. Again, another pointer to the personality doesn't need to do anything when the mystery is the presence of the being. That means it's like we are being an unknown presence of a known personality. So if the known personality claims the moment, the unknown presence would seem like its own ignorance. Anyways, Papaji says, find where the ego rises from and it will disappear. Imagine some psychologist going to a group of narcissists, and being like, all right, guys, for today's assignment, everybody has to, write a paragraph on, where the ego rises from, and how it will disappear, and you'd see fascinating liberations in the psychology of the desire of the power possessed. Because what it is that life is kind of like endless chemical reactions becoming manifestation. So on some level, it's like chaos is simulating order. Alright? But the order, when it looks at the chaos, it cannot understand how it has come from the chaos, so the order claims its own universe. You know what's strange? I feel our body is in one dimension, like an elemental universe. I feel our mind is in 2 dimensions. It's as if, do you know what I'm saying? It's as if the mind has 1 foot in the biological maintenance of survival, and then the other foot is in some sense how the inner realms are creating a life for it before it leaves this world. There's a story in the Puranas written by Rishi Vyasa, and it's such a bizarre story. It's the story of this yogi who, his whole, every moment of his life, he was being in a samadhi state because he wanted to, be in a liberated state when death happened. Right, so imagine this next level, like extreme yogi back in the day, and this yogi is just sitting on, like, they would sit on like this leather thing where insects gonna come. I don't know how to tell you, but like, this yogi's meditating, trying to be in samadhi, so when he dies, he doesn't, like, he's in a samadhi state. And suddenly, one day that he's meditating by a river, he sees that there's this big, like, pregnant deer, like caribou or something, this pregnant deer that's running being chased by a tiger, and the pregnant caribou manages to run through the river and get to the other side where the monk is meditating, and the tiger doesn't go into the water. Okay? From the caribou's perspective, it was as if like the water spirits protected. I'm just being poetic there, but anyways. So the caribou, this pregnant deer, gets to the other side of the river, gives birth, and dies. Right? And so this yogi ends up taking care of this baby deer and trying to be in samadhi all the time. And then he gets so attached in loving this baby deer, right? Like caring for it, right? That the moment he's about to die, the baby deer runs away, and instead of him being in a samadhi state, he just thinks about the baby deer, and his next lifetime, he reincarnates as a deer, but as a deer that has all the memories of his past lives, right? He he ends up eventually being enlightened, but the whole idea was that he was trying to keep the same state of mind before the exit. Now, to think like that guy is not proper, it's not efficient, because there's an easier approach. And it's as if, like, you go to the head of the problem, which is in some sense, if you want true enlightenment, you are actually wondering about how the world can be enlightened. To be enlightened in an unenlightened world is still like unenlightened. After we have cared for ourselves, the world remains. Like, what else do you care for, right? Right now, people think it's cool to say, like, I don't care, I don't give a fuck, like all of this stuff, and kind of the lingo of our times. But I will tell you, imagine if it was the other way. Imagine somebody was like, I give a fuck, like, excuse my language, I'm being unnecessarily rude, actually. But I'll say this, that I'm just saying, if people cared, what if everything suddenly became efficient? What if every human being looked at another human being and was like, yo, there's a world behind that person's eyes. There's a system of memory, a system of visualization, a past, present, and future, as if three types of worlds, three circles, like a Venn diagram. The future generations are going to look back at 2022 and be like, how did the human beings in 2022 tolerate everything looking rectangular and square? Like they're going to think we weren't creative enough to create other buildings with different shapes and structures. This is why we have to build sky cities, guys. Sky cities is the legend of the castle in the sky. That's pretty much like, Mr.Within's flight. The last quote from Papaji: thoughts are impediments to seeing your own face. Don't give rise to any thought and discover who you are. And the sentence, don't give rise to any thought, I would interpret it as if just watch how your moment is being. That is the ultimate. At least for you. For who you are. You see, the inner realms, to me, my relationship with my own mind is that my mind has become my ally. My body also, of course, the body is motivated by will, right? The willingness to live. And the willingness to live is how you value life. If you make the world in your mind, imagine you were not in samsara, you were not in any sort of, hell or misery archetype of culture and civilization. And for a moment, imagine you were in the greatest moment in existence. What would that feel like? Like, whoever you are listening to me, for a moment, just wonder about, as if this moment that we all are alive is the greatest moment in existence. You see, it means existence is at its greatest and we have opened our eyes. Right? If you have that mentality, you'll be fascinated. The world, I shouldn't say the world loves itself, but it's as if the macrocosm loves the microcosm, because without it becomes meaningless. It's like, some theologian probably has made an argument that, maybe God was lonely, or I shouldn't say lonely because there were angels in heaven, but on some level, who created the angels? You see what I mean? It's as if, like, it's so phenomenal that life is at its core geometric, which means it is liberated. Knowledge is liberated by how human beings behave after knowledge, like when they have knowledge and how they behave. The knowledge has an independent geometric value regardless of what human beings do. It's another way of saying, looking at like religious holy books and no longer being like, is this book good or bad? But in some sense realizing that good and bad is how the knowledge is used, how it is interpreted. Ultimately, it's ink on a page, and our mind is, permitting us a sort of universal access to the language simulation. Right? To me, sometimes religious books, it feels like this might sound bizarre, but you don't read a holy book. The holy book reads you. Right? It reveals itself to you. It's another way of saying, like, your attention suddenly goes to something. Right? It gets pulled by something. And then when you realize what it is being pulled, if the variables are more than 50% unknown, that's when the person puts the intellect in the passenger seat, and in some sense the capability of that unchangeable awareness, being able to experience anything, comes. That means if when you want to pilot in the unknown, beyond the archetype of the human consciousness, your presence does it. There's no personality there. That means there's states of mind that personality is secondary, but for the human psychology's personality is primary. Right? It's as if the person's like, who am I if I don't decide who I am? They didn't say the cost of freedom was the possibility of losing it. Right now the species has an incredible freedom. Right now we're living at an interesting phase in the information age. Like, beyond the information age, I would say there is the geometrical age. Beyond the geometrical age, there is the cyberspace age. Beyond the cyberspace age, there is the mecha age. The mecha age is spelled MECHA. And that would be a point where human beings have been inside cyberspace simulations for so long that they choose to step out of it. And in some sense, at that point, AI would become man's best friend, and human beings would be that would be the era of giant robots. Right? I remember I saw this YouTube video where there was this Japanese engineer and this, I don't know, other engineer, I don't know from which culture, but which country, but in some sense they were competing, and the Japanese, I think, loses, or I think wins, I don't know, but the Japanese engineering is so much more advanced than the other opponents, giant robots, right? And so at the end they interview this guy who built the giant robot, who was inside it, and they were fighting, right? The giant robot, the guy who was inside the giant robot, he was I think a man in his late 30s, and to the interviewer, he says that when I was a kid, I remember reading comics about giant robots, and I thought when I would grow up, this stuff would become real, technology would advance that far. And the guy was sad that in some sense the species was too busy in some sense to advance itself. People are late to work, but in some sense, where is the most valuable work? It is a universal perspective. It's hilarious. It's as if you play a personal dimension of reality where it's a personal role. Then you have a planetary role. Then you have a galactic role. Then you have a universal role. Then you have an inconceivable role. Then beyond the inconceivable, there is no content-oriented animation of this life force. This is the privilege of now. It's as if, how do I say it, 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere translates into is that there is 8 billion advanced designers, And the earth is our designer's table, and we are trying to create the greatest design of civilization. It's like an advanced civilization is actually when every person in the civilization is advancing, right? Where every system that defines the civilization is advancing, okay? And so when everybody's becoming advanced, and that's when an advanced civilization is actualized. It's as if it's not just, we plan it out, it's that we experience it, right? And the mind is a way of experiencing probabilities of the world. The mind is an incredible world generator, world destroyer, and world maintainer. It's as if, like, poetically, Brahman, Vishnu, Shiva, archetype of creation, archetype of maintenance, archetype of destruction. It's as if beyond the Mecha age, I see it in some sense, the shift of reality. It's pretty much going to be like this intelligence that is being a human species advancing. It's going to advance so far that it's going to completely discover itself. It's like, what is so like right now people even don't, like, the species doesn't know what the mind is, but everybody's saying they have minds. The person's like, I don't believe in the soul. You're like, okay, do you believe in the mind? And the person's like, I believe in the mind. And then you ask the person, what is the mind? The person's like, I don't know. It's like, it's not something that can be known. It's ridiculous, right? It's like the mind is as fictional as the soul. If it is conceptualized. Imagine a parallel universe where they just had the concept of body and soul. Imagine a parallel universe where they only had the concept of mind and soul, or a parallel universe where they only had the concept of mind and body, which is our current universe. You see, the context defines, sculpts the concept. To me, really, what I feel I've been doing this whole time in all these talks is like an eagle. Imagine a white eagle landing on a branch, right? And then flying towards the moon and seeing the whole forest and the mountains. It's another way of saying, like, what I'm trying to say is that it's like, to me, it's either I'm looking at life as the sky, or I'm looking at it as me. Either it's the unknown boundless, or it's the known boundaries. There's a story I'll share. I've shared it before. I'll share it again. Pretty much the story is that back in the day, it's like the story that's not from religion, but it's like based on religious culture. And so evidently these two snake oil salesmen back in the day, they go and tell people that they're selling real estate in paradise. And so people are foolish enough to believe it, and let's say the richest people are like, real estate in paradise, sure man, why not? It's like, what can I lose, right? So it was as if these two people who had just created false documents, being like, all right, you own real estate in heaven, right? And it's as if like everybody buying into it because like of a why not situation. Eventually, the smart kid comes up and looks and sees like, holy shit, this is like nonsense. It's as if paradise is based on your conduct. It's kind of like there's a stoic dimension to it, you know. And so this person sees that these guys are just snake oil salesmen. They fooled the village to think that, for example, buy real estate in paradise. And so this kid goes and tells, goes to confront these two, these two snake oil salesmen, and he says, hey guys, this is a load of crap. Like, what is this? You guys are making this up. Like, da-da-da-da-da. He tries the, offensive approach. And so the snake oil salesman says, buddy, we have so many customers, get out of here. Do you know, it's as if like you're the one missing out. You don't want real estate in paradise. And the guy's like, my children have real estate in paradise, you know. And so the kid's just standing there being like, look at this, Oscar winning thief, This is an ancient story, guys, I'm sure. So this kid thinks about like, what should I do? How can I make the village realize they're being fooled? And so he does something so next level and ingenious that he changes his mentality, and he goes to the snake oil salesman and he apologizes and he says, I can't believe you, I didn't see it like how you guys saw it. It makes perfect sense to me. I want to buy real estate too. And so the snake oil salesmen laugh and they're like, good job, kid. It's like, you've got potential, kid. All right, come on. What kind of real estate do you want? And before they offer any real estate to this kid just looks at him and says, can I buy do you have any real estate that is not paradise? And so the two snake oil salesmen laugh and they're like, what, you want real estate in hell? And the kid's like, yeah, can I buy hell? And then everybody laughs, the snake oil salesman laughs. They're like, this dumbass wants to buy hell, And so they're like, all right, kid, for your sake, because we like you, we're gonna sell all of hell to you, and you can own all of hell, and we'll give you a good price. And they give, let's say he gives not a good price. So the kid's like, okay, whatever, I'll buy it, right? So the kid buys all of hell. And then the guy, the snake oil salesman, to kind of make fun of the kid. They're like, all right, ladies and gentlemen, all our customers in the village who've lined up to buy real estate in heaven. This customer of ours has made history, and he's the first one who's bought hell. This kid bought hell, and everybody starts laughing. And the kid's standing there like with this paper that says he owns all of hell. And the kid just, after the snake oil salesman, make fun of him, all of this, the kid just smiles and he looks at everybody and he says, hey everybody, I own all of hell and I'm not letting anybody in. And so everybody was like, that means we all go to heaven. And so nobody started buying the real estate, It's as if you enter a simulation as a simulation to free the simulation from the simulation. Sometimes I wonder why my attention just has gone to the future. You don't know, because it's like literally such a unique time, for me at least, where I feel like, dare I say, I feel like commanded by the future to care to look at it. It's like, for me, my greatest honor is not in my past self and present self. The past self tried all that it could. The present self is waiting for permission, and the future self is where the permission is, right? And it's the ability to be able to see the possibility of greatness, where greatness suddenly notices you've noticed them. The divine is a reality in the inner ones. Our minds are a sort of antenna, and this antenna picks up on all the signals, and some signals make sense, some don't, right? And all psychological issues on the planet are neutralized the moment we can discriminate between this inner realm and outer realm. Whoever you are, teach this to your children, and it would be as if they would, hover over so many obstacles in life. Because in the moment you realize your inner realm, like it's as if somebody says whose responsibility is the body, right? And the person's like, it's my responsibility. And then you wonder about, okay, whose responsibility is the mind? But then you wonder about what the mind is, and the mind is the stage where the world is happening. The mind is being the world in order to create a subjective self for us. And when the work of the mind is acknowledged, that means whoever you are, just pat yourself on the back. Just do it right now. Just pat yourself on the back and acknowledge that you are the torchbearer of 4.5 billion years. Like, we are an ancient program in new eyes. Right, like the presence that comes with that, the honor. When you look at the civilization, it's like when a person sees a dirty street, it's another way of saying like what the species hasn't realized a better way to deserve it, what it deserves. Do you know? It's as if you have one lifetime to get to see the greatest version of the whole thing. I don't know how to say it. This is pretty much, enlightenment in a couple of sentences. Because, it's not something we can claim. Honesty means knowledge is a non-known. That means the most honest thing that anybody has ever said is, I don't know. That's the honesty. But then we wonder about, why is the mind here? Why is the mind a sort of biochemical engine that simulates itself and then is conscious of its interaction of its simulated subjective self with the objective reality? Like, that is some advanced, like, next level, moment of intelligence happening, right? So the moment you realize that intelligence is advanced by the nature of how it's being, then you begin to realize it's as if it's not that we've just woken up to a world. It's as if we have woken up to a world where it's as if the evolution of the home of the soul, right? That means it's as if your body has a temporary view, a temporary outlook. Your mind has an eternal outlook. And so it's as if the body fears death, the mind doesn't. It's like every moment, because it's re-simulating. It's as if the mind is eternal to itself. It's sometimes strange, but it's as if the ideas I have an eternal quality, just the nature of thought. It's as if any thought that comes, the fact that there is a thought based on its design has a connection to existence. It's as if the geometry of an event in nature, a geometrical pattern, a geometrical event where we realize it's interconnected to the geometry of all manifestation. You see, there's something super advanced happening, which for us appears so simple as human beings, and we don't second question it, like we don't wonder about it. Pretty much we're living in the time where I would say the legend of the most advanced, state of natural mind is being. It's like we're living at that time where we're trying to figure out if it's possible. Just like the Olympics, people are trying to run faster than previous Olympics. I would say for the human species, like just in some sense, honor everything. That is an instantaneous victory, I'm telling you. When it's as if the person was was angry, and then they're like, wait a minute, the world has the concept of gentleness. That inner peace means that the person is free to allow the world to advance. Right? It's as if it's just like how Christ says to be in the world but not of it. Really, the personality is being watched as the whole moment being an unchangeable awareness. It's as if what is looking out through our eyes knows that it is not what we are seeing. It's very complex because we need sight, and then we interpret sight into language, and then we talk about it. But the idea of could sight be a person just because a person sees something? Are they being what they're seeing? Do you know what I'm saying? And it's another way of saying when a person wonders about the mind, how much of their mind is their mind, and how much of imagine. It's as if it's strange to have the concept of reality and the concept of imagination at the same time. To me, it feels like either the concept of imagination should have never existed, or either the concept of reality should have never existed. But the fact that they exist together means it's as if there's something beyond both their relationships. In previous episodes, I used this metaphor of the body being like soldiers in a battlefield, the mind being a commander in a battlefield, and the soul being a general off the battlefield, watching from a distance. Now imagine that this is a suggestion of how great, guys, the future generations are going to be. It's as if the soldiers and commander are let's say, in a battlefield, and they're defending the kingdom before the general arrives. And so it's as if the greatest advancement of the mind and body, right? But then when the general arrives, it's as if the greatest advancement of the mind and body is not with its known and knowable relationships, but it's with its unknown and unknowable relationships. Human consciousness is a gateway to how consciousness is the moment the mind is not an object. In some sense, it has no limits. The mind is how the limitlessness of space is alive. Freedom beyond thought. A person can love an idea. Do you know? Imagine you're in a dangerous situation in life and something miraculous happens, and you somehow survive, right? And then you look at reality, and for you it's as if the divine is alive. And so it's as if you have the faith of someone who God was, the sound of their heartbeat more than the sound of prayer. You see, it's as if prayer is beautiful as much as meditation is beautiful, as much as somebody, fishing is beautiful. It's like every act, it's every moment, but the significance of your attention, ultimately it's an organism, and how the attention of the organism moves is simulating its psychology. And so there's so many different paths, and to me, there is, believe it or not, whatever I say, even people may think I'm being rude or not, right? I'm telling you, it's as if, my intent is just to share, in some sense, not to connect what I'm sharing to others, right? That's their choice. Right? It's as if I'm imagine an artist performing, and so then there is, it's like, okay, people are responding to the artwork. What I'm trying to say is that the moment the context is accepted to be unknown, all that we know is left with itself. There's an existential loneliness and loneliness. This existential loneliness, regardless of how much you try to ignore it, it is there, and it is there to be acknowledged, right? So when the person realizes, the silence of just all of existence existing, and how their physical existence is the same, it is in some sense part of this, the rivers of silence of the realm that move. I don't know how to say it, but what I'm trying to say is that when you realize there's what is looking out through your eyes is like the inconceivable conceiving, then you relax because the unknown was in the room before knowledge. Therefore, faith, the concept of faith in religion, is the ultimate evolution of free will. It's as if all the things that free will can do, eventually it reaches a way where it has to trust the whole system to be it. Let's say a person wonders about sorry guys, I'm just trying to see like how far I can take this episode, and I think I've honestly reached this edge because everything else is just abstract probabilities of reality. Really what it is that it's an unknown event. We are knowing a part of it beyond our knowledge. There's the mysteries of the known, pretty much. Mystics are gonna have a very important voice in the educational system. The future's gonna be amazing, guys. We just have to learn to enjoy its greatness now. Imagine, in an advanced civilization, a child asks their parents, it's like, why are you, going to work? And then the parents say, because every moment the civilization can advance. Right? It's as if the whole species has made its own greatness, its mythology. That's the beauty of the advanced civilization. The concept of civilization 2.0 is the modern mythology, guys. An advanced civilization is the modern mythology. Today I had an insight on human nature. And I realized that everybody is actually, the purpose of expression is for consciousness to validate its inner life. Everybody desires, because desire arises through the temporary context, like you're a temporary being. And so what does a temporary being do on a rock in the middle of a cosmos that we named ourselves? Like, what do? You try to find a state where you receive a clear signal from the realm. And in a cultural sense, when we can trust culture and there is an honesty factor that allows, in some sense, the originality of every DNA to express, I am telling you, the minds of human beings. Okay, let me tell you something hilarious. The movie X-Men, everybody had a different power. Imagine everybody having DNA is like the same thing but on a micro level. And so the future would be the activation of these abilities. The human species fearlessly advances in the void. This is the sum of an advanced civilization. You know, I'm tired now, but I feel like a sort of inner pleasantness to keep going. Sorry guys, this was on mute and I was, sharing some epic stuff actually. But anyways, I guess for the viewers that are watching, if anybody has a question, feel free to ask. Usually people don't have questions, I think, because they get grounded in their presence. But if there are questions, excuse me. I'll say this: does personality simulate based on realities accepted? The realities you accept, the context of the world you accept, suggests the ability of the concepts that simulates from the context. So in other words, your personality is based on how the sense of personhood comes from how you've seen the world first. It's like your first view on the world is dictating how duality is existing. When it comes to updating systems and looping systems, I think I've explained it well so far, I don't know. But I would say pretty much an updating system is a system that is not defined by the past, it is inspired by the past. It's as if rather than saying our ancestors were right or wrong, it's as if they had a motivation for the continuity as an existential being. Like our ancestors, by the mere existence of us, have achieved something that they all lived for. Right? People think that they're alone, but they're all their ancestors. That all the different lifetimes their DNA has journeyed and tunneled through. There's a show called Attack on Titan. And in the mythology of this show, there's this notion that the Titans are all connected through one river. And it's a very Vedic thought. Mainly because the Ganges River, it's as if like in so many traditions, paradise has rivers in it. And there's some rivers on earth that are considered as, you can say, paradisal rivers. Right? For example, the Ganges River. It's a paradise. It's like a heavenly river on earth. In Abrahamic traditions, they talk about in paradise how there's a river. There's so many ways the world is animated. It's just my concern is really, what does it care for? I feel that I have managed to figure out what creativity is, and all that it is that your known previous context go into an unknown context. So it means that you just realize the world is way bigger than any thought could capture. So you become instantly liberated from the subconscious pattern of the species of ideological worship. So what that means is that people worshipped idols. They're like, yo, this object is truth. And then somebody was like, no, it's not an object, it's the subject. And somebody was like, no, it's not the subject, it's an inconceivable source. You see, it's as if, like, what I'm trying to tell you is that there has been a massive language-oriented dimension to the human being, where the stories of self have been entangled with how the stories of the past are perceived. And when we're wondering what is a human being, or how will a human being walk into the future, all that we realize is that they are all their memories, they are all their abilities to imagine. Right? They're the potential of their vision, and they are all the visions they have, and they are also the free will that decides. Right? And the moment you decide, not that the future is being glorified as something where you could like sell t-shirts for, I'm telling you, the future is divinity. Perhaps to wonder about life beyond our eyes is the privilege of the lifetime. Updating systems lead to the discovery of new worlds. Looping systems is how the past feels it doesn't deserve its future. The future is the inconceivable source of the motivation of the past to exist. The mind is behaving as if it knows the future. The body is behaving as if it can't be anything other than the past. The past and future is another way of saying the mind and body are synchronous. The future is an infinite potential. That means nobody knows. That's the beauty of it, right? If somebody tells me what is the most beautiful thing, like, if I have a daughter and wife, of course the answer is obvious. But if somebody asks me now, like, what is the most beautiful thing, I would say it's the unknown. I have seen nothing more beautiful than the unknown. It's as if a question mark is a strange door to divinity, a door to the mysteries of how the realm is alive. Thanks for listening. Namaste.